The quick overview I'm going to cover is because I want you to understand what exactly is the context in which we are doing this program or doing this event. So the overview is something like this. We are looking at the situation on ground. Uh, Despite all the legislation, despite the Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we have to see what exactly prevails on ground. We have various legislations in the corporate world, like the Factories Act, like the Contract Labor Regulation Act. But how much of it is actually getting implemented is to be seen. So, largely, I think there's a lot of blame to be carried by our education system because our people who are supposed to be implementing the legislations and the project like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan need to build up the attitudes. So the attitudes, I think, come in only through a proper education. So our education system, it can be criticized for this, but at the same time, we will not get into the details of it. But generally, I think this is where we have to begin. Then, secondly, I think it is the management approach where people, the entrepreneurs, have not taken the right kind of, particularly the MSMEs, have not taken up the right kind of approach towards the health issues, towards the occupational safety issues, towards decluttering in the workplace, etc., etc. I have even come across managements which keep the toilets for there in the organization to show the notional compliance, but they keep the toilets locked so that they are not dirtied or they are not filthy. But in effect, what happens is that the workmen or the people, employees who do not get an access to the toilets, they go outside the factory and probably, you know, create a lot of filth and uh, grime outside the factory premises or just inside the precincts of the workplace. So this is something which is to be very seriously looked at. Many of the managements need to be, and actually educated on this. And I'm reminded of Rusi Modi's famous, you know, episode of how he handled such a situation in Tisco at one point in time. He just changed the placard of the workers' toilet to the management toilets and the manager's toilets placard to the workers' toilets. So overnight, the place of the urinals, the toilets got cleaned spick and span. And the management also realized that this is how it should be for even for the workers. The Factories Act has so many provisions to keep the place clean, to have the proper ventilation, to have decluttering on the shop floor. But I think the implementation is a big problem. Then came the Japanese in the late 80s and early 80s, and we found that they brought in a lot of measures like 5S, Pokayoka, Kaizen to see that the workplace is clean and spick and span. But only those organizations who got in the to learn from the Japanese themselves as to how it is to be done probably got to implement these. And many of these organizations have now not followed up on their decluttering mode. So after the Japanese left from these organizations, I think they're back to square one. Of course, there is a lot of exception, I believe, that has in the industry which prevails, and that is in the hospitality and the IT enabled industry. In a hospitality industry, you see a lot of pressure came in from the customers, the competition built by the market of tourists, that they had to keep their place clean and decluttered. So hospitality was always ahead of the other industries in terms of doing this clean, keeping the workplace clean and hygienic. Same was the case with IT and IT enabled industries, because in IT enabled industries, they were all knowledge workers. So the question of attitude was not very relevant. Post COVID, what has happened is, I think all these gaps which prevailed pre COVID have been accentuated, and also a lot of addition has been made in terms of hygiene protocols. So hygiene protocols have become phenomenally important now over the last few months, for the last 1 year, because that is how workplace has to be kept. Otherwise, the employees would fall sick, and the people who are working at the workplace would fall sick and would be subject to COVID-19, and there would be the usual aftermath, which we all know what is going to happen if one is. Sumit was talking about his attack of COVID-19, which he went through, and he's still, coming out of that. So we all know what it is. So the hygiene protocols became very important, in addition to filling the gaps that were there early. Work practices were changed. People were looking at things, social distancing, wearing masks, timings, all those things started coming in and becoming important at the workplace. Medical, even one point which I forgot to mention is that in the work practices, a lot of work is being carried out in a staggered manner. So the groups of people are put into different timings, and the same workforce is working probably round the clock to produce the same kind of, to have the same kind of productivity, but they are working in a different style. They're working with different time periods. Medical testing has become important, and it is on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a regular basis. I would say this medical testing is being done in workplaces, or it has to be done in workplaces, because the entrepreneur himself will be the sufferer if he doesn't do that. Then, of course, tracing and declaring of the symptoms. So there has to be a dashboard where in the organization where if anybody is found symptomatic or even asymptomatic, it has to be declared so that everyone comes to know in the organization. A lot of transparency has come about in terms of this activity. So tracing those cases is also important for the managements. And then last of all, I think what is important is the technology. Now, technology, I don't mean the IT technology or information technology. Of course, that is equally important. There are lots of things which have now been done in terms of information technology, which is being used. But in addition to that, I think simple temperature checking at the entry points and monitoring that on a regular basis is also technology. So lot of kits are being used, lot of temperature checking equipment are being used for in the post-COVID situation. So these are some of the situations which are being looked at, and this is how things prevail. There are a lot of gaps which need to be filled in, both pre-COVID gaps as well as post-COVID, the additional responsibilities that have come in. In addition to this, I would like to take you to the workplace health model that Percon has created. Our organization has created a model. so that implementation takes place easily. So start with the assessment of the situation, assessment in the organization, what is the present state, then a lot of planning and management to take care of after the assessment is done as to what part has to be planned, what part has to be strategized, what work has to be done, etc., etc. Then, of course, it's the uh, implementation. Implementation is a very important aspect in this, but where the planning and management has to be very, very robust. You see, before implementation, I think planning and management takes a lot of time, and implementation can happen effectively if the planning and management is robust. After the implementation is done, then we do the evaluation, whether we have been able to remove the gaps or we have been able to minimize the gaps or they continue to be the same. So this is how it is done. This is the workplace in picturized here. We have workplace in terms of an office, factory, IT, and we have sanitizers being displayed to show that this is the kind of norm that we have to live with, the new norm, as they say. So it is this assessment, then planning, then implementation, and then evaluation. So this is how we do the 4 steps we carry out. In assessment, what we do is we actually look at the individual, find out the kind of demographics, their background, their social background, their health risks and use of services, organizational current practices, what are the work environment and infrastructure, and of course the community, which is the hinterland around the organization, how transportation takes place, how food, of course, Mr. Das is going to cover this area in a greater detail, but I'm just going through what we are doing. So in planning and management, what is most important is the leadership support. We do not want entrepreneurs who want to keep their toilets locked. So we want to have entrepreneurs who are role models themselves. They walk the talk and they become the change champions. Then the management has to work out their coordination. Management has to work out their committees who are actually taking care of the planning and management and how it is to be carried forth. What are the improvement plans? That is worked out by the leadership team, the management team, that very specific goals and strategies are worked out. Then dedicated resources that have to be taken care of by this planning in this planning and management area. Dedicated resources would be the costs involved, the partners, who are the vendors, who are the partners, who would you associate in order to implement things, and the kind of staff that you are going to use or for this implementation work. Communication is again very important. As I was mentioning in my previous slide, we talk about dashboards, we talk about communication to the entire organization, messages and systems. Most of the problems happen because the communications are not clear. Now, in implementation programs, we have education and counseling, we have policies, organizational rules are to be framed and implemented. Benefits, what are the incentives and the insurances that are introduced in the organization so that people are incentivized and they feel motivated to follow the program or implement the program. What is the environmental support that the organization provides? What are the access points? What are the opportunities? What are the physical and social measures that you take in terms of providing the environmental support? So it's the organization environment, workplace environment, which has to be very, very conscious and very alert to cater to the needs of the situation. Then worker productivity, where this is the evaluation after the whole thing happens, then we are actually evaluating, and because we have to see whether we went the right way, and then worker productivity, absenteeism and quality deviations are the tools or the measures by which we know what is the worker productivity. Then healthcare costs. What is the cost involved in the quality of healthcare and the performance standards? So quality of care that is provided and the performance standards that are maintained. Improved health outcomes. So reduce disease and disability. So that means we have more of wellness in the organization, which Santosh is going to talk about. And lastly, it is the organization culture of health. So this is the culture in the organization that evolves if you do this as on a regular basis. And one cycle, two cycles in an organization will actually build that organizational culture of health. So this is what we have designed in PERCON. I'd like to quickly mention about the contextual factors. You see, this entire workplace health model is actually dependent on the organization size and the vertical in which we are talking about. Is it a pharmaceutical industry? Is it a steel industry? Is it a call center? What is it? What is the workplace? What is the vertical? That is also important. Then we have the capacity and the organizational capacity. Is it a very small organization, financially not very sound, something which is very, very profitable? So organizations will also vary. So therefore the context will also vary. The location will also be very, very important. So this is what I had to present, and I've just given you an overview of what the organization, what this workplace health should be. Now I hand over the floor to Anubha so that she can introduce the next speaker.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dhruv sir. Thank you. Now I shall invite our second panelist, Mr. S.K. Das, to talk about the trends of the corporate towards the health issues over the years, and if the influence of COVID-19 would warrant mandatory changes. S.K. Das, an engineer by profession, born and brought up in the steel city of Jamshedpur, has more than 35 years of experience in various functions in the House of Tatas. He also served in a private university as Director Technical. Currently, he is a management consultant and a lead auditor in quality environment and occupational health and safety management systems. Das sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Anubha, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about the industrial perspective of this pre-COVID and post-COVID scenario. Is the screen visible?
No.
No, sir.
Yeah, it is coming now. Yeah, now it is visible.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the workplace health, typically in the industrial scenario, the organizational context.
Das sir, you got to be a little louder, please.
Yes. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
This is yours truly. Now, before I go ahead, I'd like to share a thought of a philosopher in 17th century, René Descartes. He said, "I think, therefore I am." We all human beings are distinguished because of our thinking power. This is high time we have to start thinking, put the thinking cap on. Even today, we have seen that we got some 300 registrations and only 5 participants have joined in. Somewhere that they have a feeling in the back of the mind that I know everything. I don't need anything to learn and I don't need to put a thinking cap on this. So somewhere they have got adjusted to it and they accepted it. This is not acceptable. So I'll be talking about corporate health issues pre-COVID versus post-COVID. What was happening? Having been an auditor of health and safety for many years now, what I have seen, the first part we'll talk about is the pre-COVID scenario. What was going on, and then we'll talk about post-COVID scenario. First part, level of awareness and understanding. I'm not talking about COVID. Before COVID, before March, perhaps very few of us knew about what it is all about. But yes, at the workplace, we all needed to know the health and safety issues connected. Typically, I'm talking about the health and hygiene factor. That what kind of hygiene factors to be taken care of at the workplace. The understanding was more ritualistic. And understanding was also there, but then once people go on working, they forget about all these factors, like people working in a say yarn making or some other place. They forget about that the dust carries lot of particles of yarn, and that goes into their lungs. Typically in cement industry, I've seen people using some kind of handkerchiefs or gamcha on their nose, the workers. There's some echo. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this kind of awareness were there by compulsion, but not with conscious effort. Then management were equally not committed to it. That they are mostly connected to the profitability, production, productivity, and all this. But health and safety is always taking a back seat. If at all they have to do something, then they'll appoint a first aid master or put a first aid box somewhere containing some kind of medicine, some dressing material, and all. That is all. Nothing beyond that. And at the best, they'll put some banners inside the plant about health and safety, but nothing beyond that. The issue was of the resources also. There was no thought that you have to assign somebody who is responsible or to make people aware people are using those PPE, so to say, at the workplace. Then level of implementation, certain regulations. Mr. Trivedi talked about Factories Act. Factories Act is very clear about health and hygiene factor at the workplace inside a factory. But the implementation is basically ritualistic, that they want some rules, they display it on the notice board and they feel that's enough. The implementation part, there was no one to check. The safety officer also takes around and bits of pep talk to some people, and that's it. His job is over. Now coming to the post-COVID scenario, which is more pertinent today, and we have to keep our focus more on that. The first part is meeting the regulations and international standards. The regulations issued by our PMO or the ministries and health and safety authorities, at the Factories Act as well, and there are international standards like ISO 45001, which talks about risk orientation. That 9001 talks about the business risk, but 45001 talks about the health and safety risk. If at all you are not abiding or you're not following the standards prescription, then what kind of risks are there? Ministry of MSME has also under that ministry, QCI, Quality Council of India, they have created an initiative called WASH, Workplace Assessment for Safety and Health. There's a scheme started, but somehow it is not picking up. It's not gaining the kind of popularity it should have. The industries are not interested for their obvious reasons. Even ISO 45001 we are talking about, the scenario is that it is customer driven. If the customers are insisting, typically the foreign buyers, they say that we wish you to have this kind of standard certification, ISO 9001, ISO 14001 for environmental pollution, and ISO 45001 for employee health and safety. Then only we'll buy your product or services. That compels the industry to some extent. But meeting the regulations and international standards are very important now, and the actions taken by the concerned authorities also very severe. So one have to be very careful about that. The risk management orientation I talked about. Again, I'm talking about ISO standards. Initially, when it was started, they used to talk about documentation. Write what you do and do what you write. That applies to product quality, service quality, even in health and safety. But the orientation was weak. Now they talk about, think of risk. If you are not aware of what kind of risk you have, you think of a person. I saw a lady security guard at one of the factory gates. She was using chunni for covering her nose. I told her that you are trying to show me as an auditor that you are complying to the covering the nose, but face mask has no substitute. This chunni is not enough, and because every time you change the position of chunni, the other portion will come, and perhaps you will keep the infected part on your nose. All risk is yours. And the most important part I shared with that lady was that risk is yours. You are sitting at the gate, hundreds of people coming and going out, and you are coming in close contact with them, checking their gate pass and all kind of things. Sometimes you have to go for body search also. All risk is yours. You forget about compliance, forget about regulations, forget about rules, forget about what your supervisors say. Think of your own health for your own family and your society. Then the most important part is training and awareness. People need to be trained that how important it is. I have seen the effect is also being seen in family. I have seen a 4-year-old boy washing his hand on a wash basin and counting up to 20 before rinsing his hand. So this kind of awareness has gone into even a baby boy, baby children also. So that awareness has to go up. Something has already happened, but that is not enough. We have to keep on hammering. Secondly, training and awareness is effective only when it is implemented. The level of implementation can be ensured only when you keep on hammering again and again. Just telling them that be safe, practice safe thing, cover your nose, the 3-point of the ministry, that cover your nose, and then maintain safe distance, wash your hands and all that. You have to keep on repeating, keep on telling, and keep on pointing out. The supervisors, typical at the shop floor, and the line managers need to keep on pointing out that anybody not wearing nose mask will not be allowed to work at his workstation. Then comes provision of resources. We have to provide at many industry. We have seen that they are using. They started providing the sanitizer dispensing machines. Sometimes it is automated, non-contact, and all that. That is not enough. Let us think little more on that. For example, that even healthy persons should inhale steam at least twice or thrice in a day. Why not have a steam inhaler at the security gate? The security guards who are exposed to so many people, they're open to air, the open atmosphere. So whenever they go for tea break, why not inhale couple of inhalation of steam after taking cup of tea? Because for them it is very important, and this resource is not very expensive. Like we talk about sanitizing, in many of the offices I have seen they are using ultraviolet sanitizer for mobile phones and even diaries and all that. But it is to go deeper. It has to spread widely. People should use it at every place, every location, even for the product. Many countries, they don't accept your material if you put them on a wooden pellet, and those wooden pellets are not properly fumigated. Typically, country like Australia, I remember 30 years ago when I was exporting materials, aluminium and all that, they wanted fumigation certificate by a authorized agency. Then only the material can be shipped to that country. So that is one small example that is already in practice, but now it has to go for all other products also. Imagine an office buys a pack of bulbs containing say 2 dozen bulbs in a pack. If there is something wrong, then every bulb will spread its infection to all these locations wherever you are putting in. So that means we have to go for taking precautions or taking preventive measures at the source only. Why not the company who is sealing that, packing that packet of 24 bulbs in a box, they sanitize it, and sanitization doesn't cost a fortune. They can go for ultraviolet. There are other methods also like gamma rays and all that. So that technology is available. It may be one-time expenditure, but yes, it is very much needed. Another part is very important, the supply chain, where from the material comes. You never know. You are unpacking a raw material, incoming goods. It may be infected, it may be carrying the virus. So the responsibility is on the supplier. At the same time, think of the truckwala, think of the helper, think of the workmen, the workers, those who lift those containers or boxes onto the truck, and they unloading and loading and unloading part. Even at the midway, some authority police checks those containers for whatever reason. Are they sanitized? Or after that, after their inspection, is it sanitized before repacking it? We have to make it sure that entire supply chain management is tuned to this kind of post-COVID scenario and precautions and all that. Then another very important thing is sanitization of incoming and outgoing goods. Simple ultraviolet rays sanitization is very simple. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it doesn't take time. Simply you pass it through tunnels. In many of the industries started, they have created a walkway tunnel through which the employees pass, and there's some fog or something to sanitize their whole body. Why not do that for all the incoming material to a factory? Same thing for outgoing goods. In the final inspection and packing stage, go for sanitization. Put a sticker onto it. Like in a hotel, you see in the toilet seat that this commode seat is sanitized for your health and safety. Same thing can be, small sticker can be put on a box so that the one who receives it feels good about it. Yes, the person who has packed it for me with all love and care, with all precaution, and this is 100% safe for me or for my workmen. This has to be there. Forget about rules and regulation. Forget about what the standards are talking about. Again, going back to ISO 45001, occupational health and safety audits. The standard nowhere talks about COVID, but nonetheless, I have seen the auditors, including me, we talk about COVID preparedness. We go to any organization while auditing, we do ask questions. What is their COVID preparedness? That is also one of the aspects of your risk management. And last but most important part is the waste disposal. How we dispose waste. Somewhere people talk like your nose mask. If you throw it, you're not supposed to do that. You have to keep it at your house in a packed condition for 72 hours. Then no dispose it. Even then, I'm not sure that how do we prevent it from recycling? In a country like ours, a lot of recycling happens of the water bottles on the Rajdhani Express and other trains. Same thing happens to your nose mask. If you throw it in a garbage, somebody might be picking up, and after cleaning it may be sold in Chowdi Bazaar. How do you know? So one of my submission is whenever you're disposing such thing, you destroy it, cut it with a scissors in two part and whatever. So damage it so that it cannot be reused for the same purpose, number one. Secondly, in an industry where a lot of such waste is generated, the nose mask and all that, it has to be disposed of properly. We have to work on norms, think of it, even for incineration, you can go, but then think of the fumes coming out, it affects the environment. All these things have to be done with total responsibility, and everyone has to be careful about it. This is where I wish to close my statement. Thank you everybody for patient listening. Over to Anubha.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Das sir. Thank you so much for such a wonderful session. I'm sure the audience has gained immensely. Now I would like to invite our third panelist, Mr. Santosh Mishra, who's a human resource organization leader with 14 years of all-round HR experience and 4 years of general management and HR entrepreneurship experience in a career spanning global enterprises, early stage startups, and Indian MNCs. His experience spans enterprise IT, consumer software, R&D, SaaS, e-commerce, biotech, and mobility sectors, and multicultural millennium forces. Santosh, please take over the dais.
Thank you, Anubha.
Go on. Santosh, now you can upload.
Santosh, please upload now.
Yeah. I'm just going there. Okay. Okay. Share content. Desktop. Somehow in my PC I can still dash starts.
Now
okay.
We can see your presentation.
Yes, you can see.
Wonderful. So, look, when we talk about corporate wellness, I just thought it's worthwhile spending a little bit of time understanding it, the vast spread of what we really talk about, because the different kind of organizations understand this very differently. And when we talk from the perspective of interventions, when we talk from the perspective of expertise, or when we really look at it from the perspective of what really ideally we should look after, then I think it's good to get a bird's eye view, and that's what I've really tried to do. So the way I look at it is that, a corporate wellness or organizational wellness really has 4 key dimensions. 2 out of them are individual dimensions, which to my mind is more of the individual physical wellness, the individual emotional wellness, and I'll come to that a little later. How do we define that? But also more importantly, the workplace, there is also a component of workplace wellness, which is more about the collective wellness at the workplace. And there both the physical systems, the social systems, the human beings, the leadership, they all have a role to play. And then of course, wellness discussion is complete without understanding the emergent needs of the people at the workplace, because today the workplace is not a very uniform demography. There are very different kinds of demographies, and we are really looking at different strokes for different folks, and how does that play out. So when we really look at physical wellness, I think primarily we are looking at physical body related wellness aspects. So that really comes down to nutrition, exercise, sleep, and rest. How well people are today in a typical private organization, private setup, are able to balance these fundamental basic needs. Now, as far as nutrition is concerned, the way I see this is that a lot of big organizations where you have a fairly well-to-do corporate canteen, people are able to manage that well. But when it comes to a lot of smaller companies, ITS organizations, a lot of consulting companies, a lot of companies who are in the so-called SEZ also, you really do not have a lot of, what I call well-balanced Indian diet available. You may have a lot of fancy food available, you have a lot of sugar available, you have a lot of, soft drinks that are available, you have a lot of baking goods products that are available, but fundamentally a balanced nutrition today, if you go to any corporate hub in Delhi, Gurgaon, NCR, Bangalore, all over the country. In fact, I mean, unless it's a fairly big organization which has invested in a fairly decent corporate canteen and has taken some time to identify the right kind of vendors, today the nutrition side of the corporate world is challenged. I see this challenge going to be there for a while because people are now working. So gone are the days when people used to work 9 to 6 or 10 to 7, something like that. Today people are spending 12 to 15 hours of work on an average just to ensure that they keep up the job and just grow year to year. So people are actually consuming more bad food and more junk. That's to me is a alarming thing because of course you are not getting exercise a lot, even though there are gyms. And when you consume junk, it leads to several other lifestyle related wellness and illness challenges. And working disproportionately more, and of course now let me not talk about COVID. I think quite a bit of time has already been spent on that. But there, when you also spend time in commuting and all the sleep patterns, the rest patterns goes for a toss. So I think the physical wellness is a significant challenge to my mind. The emotional wellness, today people are emotionally challenged because today all of us are leading complex lives and due to personal reasons, professional reasons, due to career challenges, due to aspirational challenges, due to a very changing visibility of wealth in our immediate surrounding. I think there are many reasons for why people might have emotional challenge, and those relates to stress, anxiety, burnout at workplace. I mean, we know for a fact, as per a latest research, I mean, today you are having burnout issues in people who are in their mid 30s to early 40s, and earlier you used to have about 5 to 6 years before. Burnout is something that you really associated with a demography, maybe 50-55 upwards, but today burnout is a term that people utilize for people even in their mid 30s. Workplace wellness. What does workplace wellness is really about? I mean, the way I define workplace wellness is that the sum total of positive well-being that a workplace can generate. Now it has combination of factors playing into it. It has, of course, the physical, emotional side that we already discussed, but it also has a collective social side. That means as an organization, have we fostered the right kind of social behaviors? Have we fostered the right kind of teamworks? Do we consciously keep corporate politics away from the workplace? Do we discipline and kind of give a message to managers who, for instance, display toxic behaviors? And these are the aspects which combined together look at how well a overall workplace is perceived in terms of workplace wellness. And this is a very intangible feeling. You can't define it in terms of this many times you should wash hands, or this many times you should sort of do some analysis, but people intuitively feel it. And if this is a toxic workplace vis-a-vis a workplace which has very strong wellness aspects, you can see morale, motivation will be of a very different order, and attrition will be lower. People will bring more discretionary performance. I mean, there is a recent study which has happened world over, last year published, where it says that people bring 26% of discretionary performance. That means we are not asking them, or the boss or the manager or the promoter is not asking them to perform more. But because the workplace is in such a way that people are really motivated to do better for their workplaces. So I think that is called discretionary performance. And the moment the workplace wellness aspect is looked at in totality, that starts to grow. Now let's come to the demography and the emergent needs. Now, there was a time when you really had probably 1 or 2 generations working together in an organization. Today, that's not the case. Today, you have in the same organization people with various kinds of age groups, starting from early 20s to mid 30s to 50s, 60s. A whole lot of people are also post 60s are continuing to work as consultants, or for instance, in independent capacities, in part-time work environment. Also, the definition of workplace has also increased. For instance, today workplace not only includes your own company, but it also includes the partners, the contractors, the other organizations, your suppliers, your OEMs, your MSPs, and that also is a part of your wider, what I would call corporate setup. And these, all of these aspects means that you really can't have a one-size-fits-all wellness approach. There has to be different strokes for different folks. Within that, millennials, especially people, you know, who are today in their 20s to 30s, they are a very vocal segment. They are an increasingly growing segment. They are a very highly productive segment. And, you know, this generation knows how to articulate its views. And this generation also knows to walk out of a workplace quickly if those issues are not being met. So these are the very different kind of dimensions which makes a wellness challenge important. And it is also a very important aspect of understanding it holistically. And it also makes the job of a corporate leader or a promoter or a managing director or a HR leader that much more difficult. So therefore, what are some of the structural angles to this? What are some of the response that one sees today, and how does really it all fills in together? So one of the things that I really see today, that the increasing cost of healthcare means that employees and organization are sharing the insurance cost, sharing the elder care cost, sharing the parental health care cost, and in many ways the preventive healthcare is a direct response to increasing cost of healthcare, where there's a lot of focus on preventing certain things from happening rather than, you know, how to do the best treatment after it has happened. So then therefore the pattern of lifestyle is basically now in focus. What are the kind of facilities that are available at the workplace, that's in focus. As Dasar very interestingly point out, I think he used a very interesting term, you know, at a very superficial level, compliance versus reality of certain workplace wellness and health dimensions. So you know, there I think it's very important to look at, if we have a certain budget for wellness, you know, how are we spending it? For instance, I am very sort of fond of this example. I have most of the time seen companies spending a whole lot of money on a fancy, say for instance, creche or gym, which will not have a lot of utility in terms of sheer numbers, but companies don't spend in terms of putting good chairs, good ergonomic chairs. But the fact of the matter is that a good ergonomic chair today is available at a very, very reasonable rate, and employees likely utilize it more. And those kind of trade-off decisions has to be done intelligently. And I think that is where what Dhruv sir was saying in terms of, you know, having a diagnostic framework is very, very helpful. The other trend that I see today is that the digital wellness side, where, you know, people are moving to manage and monitor their health care, their biostats, you know, their blood pressures, then you know, the different aspects of physiological wellness through sensor-based or digital monitors, or you can wear a watch, you know, you can see how actually you are working out. You know, many organizations are promoting friendly competitions within their senior teams and colleagues just to see, you know, how it is working out. Then I think alternative therapies, I think for a long time we knew that, look, yoga, Ayurveda, nature therapy, all of these things have existed for thousands of years. But today there is a very renewed interest in all of this. And I think therefore only one thing I would like to say here is that I think if an organization is utilizing some of these practitioners, they should really look at very good professionals, because what is happening today, because now some of these segments are become very popular within the larger population. Now more number of people today practice yoga and pranayama than let's say 20 years before, because and you know, if I remember distinctly, when I was a child, there was actually a environment where many of our traditional therapy systems were discouraged. In fact, people used to prefer to pop a goli, you know, but today people are really looking up and questioning their healthcare models, and they are really saying that if we can be well in an alternative approach, why not go preventive? So therefore, investing in the right kind of wellness professionals for organization is very critical, because there is a lot of people who are suboptimal and less professional, who are trying to simply cash in on the boom. Then you also have the counseling helplines, where people could actually go and take care of a professional therapist. And I see today these are sort of increasing quite a bit. And that's a very welcome step, because traditionally in India as a society, we have always sort of tried to downplay this entire mental wellness challenges and the reality that mental wellness does exist. I mean, if tomorrow my leg breaks, I hope it doesn't. But the point is that if it does break, I'm not shy to talk about it with any of you. But if for any reason I'm depressed, I don't want to talk about it. That's the reality. And this is the reality starting from CEO downwards. All of us, all the people who are that much more successful, they have these emotional ups and downs, which are that much sharp and prevalent. But for a long time in the corporate world, we are not talking about it. At least I think I see a very welcome change where people are moving. They're talking about it. They're taking care, taking help of professionals. It is being destigmatized. It is being popularized in the common discourse to the extent that very popular actresses, they are also kind of stepping up and saying, well, look, at some point in time, I also went through this. I mean, these are all very welcome things to really recognize that this has been the unsaid chapter of corporate wellness in India so far. Now, fundamentally, what is it the outcome therefore we are looking at? We are looking at the outcome where is our leadership and our productive workforce continues to remain that. And I think it's very important to recognize that preventive healthcare is always better than treatment. Because, I think the third thing I would basically say that driving a conscious wellness approach is a much better business. It makes sense business wise, it makes sense retention wise, and many of us may think, well, how it makes sense business wise, because it is probably increasing my cost. Well, the example I always like to give is that just imagine one of your senior executives is down with, let's say, something as simple as a spondylosis, and like people who are senior executives, spondylosis is a common thing, but you can't imagine something as simple and as well treatable like spondylosis results in something close to like 10,000 management man hours lost in this country every year. Now, if somebody you are paying like 1 crore per annum or 50 lakhs per annum or 60 lakhs per annum for a senior executive, you can simply do basic math. I am not even going to the opportunity cost. So I think good wellness and right conscious wellness approaches also make tremendous amount business sense. It definitely makes sense for a lot of small and medium scale organizations where I think money wise they may not be able to compete with a whole lot of bigger organizations in terms of salaries, but I think they can definitely create a wellness that gives these two messages, that this organization cares for you, and if the employees trust message and see that happening, then they also want to grow with you, because trusting and building a bond between the employer and the employee is a prerequisite to both of them growing together. And I think if we look at healthcare and wellness holistically and we do some of the response things well, then I think a lot of organizations can win the war of talent. So I'll just stop here and I'm open for questions as we go to the next segment of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, Santosh. For such an informative insight on mental health issues, we shall stand educated. Now I shall invite Dr. Nijhawan, an army veteran and senior medical practitioner and specialist with the clinical, teaching and management experience of 42 plus years. He is currently managing the Department of Anesthesia and Critical Care in KDMC Medical College, Mathura. Floor is all yours, Dr. Nijhawan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anubha. Good morning to everybody who's attending this colloquium organized by Percon. We have heard from our colleagues, namely Mr. Trivedi, Mr. Das and Mr. Mishra, about the various, approaches to the disease processes, their possible effects, their preventive measures, the possible solutions. But mainly they have been, the industrial sort of diseases, then mental wellness, lifestyle diseases, etc., etc. But At the outset, I would request you to kindly pay attention to the broader spectrum of the disease prevalence. The disease caused by today is not only because of that. It is primarily because of the infections which are occurring in our community. It could be, the infection could be a bacterial infection. It could be a viral infection. It could be a rickettsial infection. It could be a parasitical infection. And the glowing example of this infection as on today is the COVID-19 pandemic, which is sweeping across the globe. If we go into the pandemics which have ravaged the human mankind, I would like to attract your attention towards Spanish flu, which started somewhere in 1918 and ended in 1920. It was there for almost 2 years. I can assure you there was no medicine available for treating this pandemic. What people did then are the same methods or same modalities or the same preventions are being adopted today for the pandemic of COVID-19. So in other words, if I take this as an extension, we do not have a definite treatment for COVID-19. We only have certain preventive measures to block its transmission. And as pointed out earlier, you must have noticed. Hello. Am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, fair enough. So if you see I would like to take your thoughts process. Few months ago, there was some kind of friction point between Indian Foreign Office and administration of the Donald Trump on a piddly little medicine called chloroquine. They expect Dr. Anthony Fauci said the pandemic can be treated, this disease can be treated by chloroquine. So there was some problem in shipment of this drug to that country. But today, I'd like you to inform that the hallmark of the treatment modality or the medicine for this particular pandemic, the drug called remdesivir, has been rejected by the doctors for its treatment. So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is there is a continuous process of evolvement of the disease, the continuous process of the treatment of the disease. And as we are passing into the time, we are learning about the disease. And about 3 or 4 months ago, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the advisor to the President of the United States of America, made a very famous statement. Gentlemen, we know nothing about this disease. So the status hasn't changed. It has, of course, caused a lot of problems in production, GDPs, etc., etc. Human man hours have been lost. Morbidity and mortality has been lost. And India is in technical recession because 2 subsequent quarters our GDP has contracted. So there you are, sir. Now I'd like you to concentrate on this disease itself. The offices and other workplaces are in the closed setting. And the shared spaces like corridors, elevators, stairs, parking places, cafeteria, meeting rooms, etc. And thus COVID infection can spread relatively fast amongst officials, staff and visitors. So there is a urgent need of preventing the importation of the infection in working place so that a suspect case of COVID-19 is easily detected or suspected so as to limit the spread of the infection. The onus totally is on the blocking of the transmission of this particular disease and giving the patient the supportive treatment modality to overcome the disease by his or her immunity and fighting potential of the body to combat this disease. So we present you a document which outlines the preventive and response measure to be observed to contain the spread of this disease in workplace setting, like basic preventive measures which need to be followed at all times. Secondly, measures specific to the offices, measures to be taken on occurrence of the case, and disinfection procedures to be implemented in case of occurrence of suspect oblique confirmed case. Now, the basic preventive measures are simple public hygiene measures which need to be followed in case of to reduce the risk of this COVID infection, like physical distancing. Now, physical distancing, it can be 1.5 meter or 2 meter or 3 meter, but it has to be in a manner. It has to be done in a manner that your breath does not hit the person you are facing, so that the transmission of the disease can be blocked. Use of covers and mask is mandatory. And again, the diameter of the pore of the mask is of importance. All these viruses and these infective material has to be confronted with a mask with pores diameter of 0.3 micron. The problem with the reducing of the diameter of the mask is, in case you reduce the diameter of the pore of the mask further, your normal respiration will be labored. Work of breathing will increase, and that is detrimental for the health. But in case you increase the diameter of the pore of the thing, the very purpose for which it is being used will be defeated. Then respiratory etiquettes and the self-monitoring of the person who should be made aware of the disease of prevalence, and guidelines have been issued by the Government of India, Ministry of Health and Welfare. I would request Ms. Anubha to display the link for this particular guideline protocol.
It's already there.
It's already there.
So any staff reported suffering from the flu-like illness should be allowed not to attend the office maybe at the organization's cost. And any staff requesting home quarantine based on containment zone visitors in their residential areas should be permitted for work from home scenario. And DFOT guidelines are available with respect to organization meetings, coordinating visitors, etc. Next step is the measures to be taken on the occurrence of the case. Despite taking all these preventive measures which we have enumerated or which we are getting accustomed to now because of the evolvement of the disease, the infective cases will come. The people will suffer from this particular disease till such time our immunity levels are augmented to a level where we can ward off the ill effects of this disease. Maybe by vaccination, maybe by herd immunity, or whatever method you need to adopt for the blockage of the transmission of the disease. Now, the measures required for the organization in case of occurrence of this disease should be enumerated in the following sentences. Place the ill person in a secluded room with a mask and inform the local health authorities. They have the rapid response teams made in the district headquarters under the flagship of CMO's office to attend to such emergencies. And then there is a helpline number also available for the whole of India as 1075. A risk assessment will be undertaken by the designated public authority, and the suspect will be having either mild symptoms or the major symptoms. I'll just enumerate you the protocol under which you can classify the diseased person. The concept, now the classification of the diseased persons. Contacts are the persons who have been exposed to a confirmed case anytime between 2 days prior to the onset of the symptoms in the patient in the positive case and date of isolation to a maximum of 14 days. High risk contact, touch body fluids, patient's respiratory tract infection, blood, vomit, saliva, urine, feces, etc. had direct physical contact with body of the patient, including physical examination without gloves and PPE kit, touched or cleaned linens, clothes or dishes of the patient, etc., etc. And low risk patient is shared the same space, worked in the same room, but not having high risk exposure to the confirmed case, traveled in the same environment. To give you a rule of thumb, if you come in contact with even in the known patient for less than 15 minutes and share the same room and the same car for less than 15 minutes, you are a low risk. You're not a high risk. Now I'll come back to closure of these management of the minor cases and major cases, major risk cases has been given in these in the management of the contact. There are links available on the slide which can be followed. Now the closure of the workplace. If there are 1 or 2 cases reported, the disinfection procedure will be limited to place areas visited by the patient in past 48 hours. There is no need to close down the entire building, halt work in the areas of the office. The work can be resumed after disinfection process is completed as per laid protocol. However, if there is a larger outbreak, the entire building will have to be closed for 48 hours. After thorough disinfection, all the staff will work from home till the building is adequately disinfected. Now I'll draw your attention to the disinfection process to be followed in the offices. There are detailed guidelines available. The whole guidelines, if I start enumerating, it will take a lot of time. But for your convenience, a link has been provided in the slide above where a disinfection process can be followed in the office. In the end, I'd like to talk about a little bit about the vaccines which are forthcoming. There is a vaccine which is available in America. There is a vaccine which is going to be used by NHS in UK. Then there is a vaccine which is available on the European continent. Even India is also in the fairly advanced stage of developing its own vaccine. We do not have access to the Chinese vaccine, but Russian vaccine has been made available to us, and hopefully the inoculation will start by the end of this year or maybe start of the next calendar year. But a word of caution about these vaccines, though they are claiming a success rate of 90%, 95%, 100%. But you see, till such time these vaccines are not used on human bodies, their results are not available to us, it will be very difficult to say how successful this vaccination problem or program is going to be there. So in the end, I'll wish human race all the best with the help of these vaccines if they develop adequate immunity and the disease is won over. I have finished talking on these places. I would request you to kindly ask me any questions if you have related to my area of discourse.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nijamat, for providing us some solutions and for adding value to our learning. Now, with this we come to the end of our presentation. Now the session is open for question and answer. Participants can ask questions from our panelists one by one. Any questions one has? Anyone has any questions?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself.
Good afternoon to all our distinguished panelists. I am Harijan Das. I am a consultant waste management. Sir, to all panelists, my one humble request, when we have talked about the sanitation part of the workplaces, your management, waste management also is an equally important for all the workplaces, whether they are offices, community halls, or even your malls. Everybody is having a workplace. The helping by keeping it segregated waste all under, this kind of ambit that nothing gets spread as a disease to the work fellows or to the people who are attending or the people who are visiting there. This is very, very important, and understand the importance of decentralized waste management. Apart from that, that also should be a part of our office, curriculum, what we are exactly talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Particularly, Mr. Das, sir, I thank you very much. I don't know whether I know you personally. Yes. I had been in Jamshedpur with Voltas as the area manager for 9 years, and I'm a very good part of your JUSCO, who are managing the waste management, because my interest in that field.
Okay. I was in technical training division, heading steel technology and quality.
Sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone has any other questions?
I think Mr. Harijan Das has made a very relevant
I have got
point. Hello?
Yes, please.
Sir.
I was saying that Mr. Harijan Das has made a very valid point. And I think both Mr. S.K. Das and Dr. Nijaman can really comment on that, take it forward on that. Das, yes. Sir, if you can start, please.
Could I start, sir?
Please.
You see, the waste disposal coming out of a workplace is definitely different from the waste coming out of a hospital. The hospital waste is segregated into different three-part containers with a different color code. But for a particular waste coming out of the home or from the office or from the industry, it will have to be assessed on a different line. Now, any dangerous waste to be disposed of has to be handled by a specialized handler. Number one. For that particular handler will require a special rig, and then segregation without touching the waste into various parts. The contagious waste should go to an incinerator and should immediately be incinerated so that it is reduced to the ash, which is quite harmless. Secondly, your utensils and other things they go into a very simple solution of bleaching powder with the water. A bleaching powder of about 7 grams to a liter can be dissolved, and accordingly a concentration of 0.07% will be made, and you can immerse all your contagious utensils and usable domestic appliances in that for a period of about half an hour to 45 minutes. And that will solve your problem of total disinfection. I've segregated into disinfection with the help of chlorinated solution and the incineration. The incineration, you have to tie up with the biomedical waste disposal agencies in your area.
Thank you. Dr. Nijavan has covered all my thoughts. In industry, only thing needed is that you have to segregate biomedical waste and non-biomedical waste. And the biomedical waste to be handled as Dr. Nijavan was prescribed, it has to be done through authorized agency. Like non-biomedical waste handling and say industrial hazard waste is handled as per the industrial norms and as per the Factories Act and as per the regulations. They know, like National Green Tribunal has got some prescriptions on that we have to follow. Only thing that biodegradable waste has to be segregated separately, and typically biomedical waste which is generated in bare minimum in industries. But yes, it has to be handled very, very carefully. Thank you, Dr. Nijavan.
I have got one question.
Please.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
Please.
See, I was told that oxygen radical absorbance capacity, or ORAC, is very vital to gauge or measure immunity of the person. And there are many herbs or masala, Indian masala, which is very good for developing capacity for ORAC, I mean enhanced ORAC. And what is your idea, or what is your opinion on this?
Sir, I'll take this question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my submission is very simple to you. Any professor of medicine will tell you, which I learned from my professor. He said to me when I was attending his first lecture of medicine way back in 70s, he said, any person coming to you with a disease, you give him anything. You give him any medicine, 1/3 of your patients will become all right. In the second 1/3 of the patients, you give him the best medicine which is available to you, he will not become all right. The last 1/3 of the patients are those where your diagnosis comes to the fore, your knowledge comes to the fore. If you diagnose your patient correctly and institute the correct medicine to that patient, you will successfully treat that patient. So in effect, you will treat 2/3 of your patient, which is reasonably good number. Now specifically to your question, you see all these modalities are with us in experimental stage. We are doing a lot of research. Now Swami Ramdev has come out with a Kada, which is he's claiming to be treating for COVID-19 patients. Dr. Fauci, he came out with remdesivir. Then prior to that, chloroquine was being investigated. So what I'm trying to, there is no harm in trying various concoctions available to us for the treatment of the anything which succeeds wins the game. Anything which wins the game, treats the patient, wins the game. And it is not specific to one. But you will agree with me, a hypothesis becomes a law only when it is replicable in every case. I hope I have been able to address your concern for in little measure which I could possibly do.
I think you have answered my question partially. Specifically, coming again, you see, people who are not experts, for them, some support, even in the thought process, if people feel that this is good for me and they go along taking those things, then internally they feel satisfied that yes, I have taken all the precautions I need to, apart from, of course, wearing mask, maintaining the distance and all that. So to that extent only my question, because we, whatever all said and done, we can't become an expert. So the expertise is certainly lies with you only. And so that is why I asked the question, because we keep reading so many things from here, there, everywhere. So whatever is
Sir,
really good,
I would only submit to you is, I can only talk about the proven modalities available to us for the amelioration of the symptoms and the disease process as on today. Maybe tomorrow, what your modality which you're suggesting to be adopted, if it becomes successful, I will be the first person to embrace that modality for the treatment of my patients. But as of now, the clinical evidence is lacking on that part.
Yeah.
So, doctor, what you're suggesting is that things should be, the treatment should be replicable. That is the underlying.
In every case.
Yeah, okay.
In every case. Once you diagnose the case, the treatment should be replicable. That is the standard line of treatment.
Any more
Thank you,
questions?
doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, Dhub Sahab, you were saying something?
No, I was just thinking the doctor.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Another simple anecdote I found is inhale steam. Keep a steam inhaler on your desk and inhale steam just for 2 minutes, at least 3-4 times a day. That takes care of everything.
Sir, you are suggesting steam. Then Baba Ramdev suggests neti, jal neti, tel neti, alcohol neti. So then there is another fellow who says ki nahi, put a thread in your this thing nose, from nose, one nose you take out from the other nostril and sort of do the ragdo part.
As a yoga enthusiast,
I've got nothing against steam. I've got nothing against the steam, because you see the normal at the end of the day is COVID infection is a viral disease, and the most frequent viral disease we come across in life is common cold. If you give treatment to common cold, it takes 7 days, and if you don't take treatment for common cold, it becomes all right in 1 week. That's the joke. But the only problem with common cold is that it is very rampant, it is very common, and it is not occurring on a regular basis. The tragedy with COVID-19 is it has come all of a sudden, and it has certain amount of morbidity and mortality attached to it, which is clearly far in excess as compared to common cold. So that is why it has become such a clinical problem for doctors to treat. But I can assure you, we do not have any standard line of treatment for COVID-19. All we are doing is giving the body props. The allopathy is giving just props. Maybe homeopathy has got a treatment. Maybe this thing Ayurveda has a treatment. They are most welcome to treat patients. If we succeed, why not? Idea is to successfully treat the patient.
Agreed. Agreed. They have a point.
I hope I am going to continue.
No, I said agreed. Any more questions? Before we close it, another 3-5 minutes are left. Shrutam, can you hear me? Shrutam? Is he around?
I think if there are no more questions, there is no point in waiting.
I know. So
We should call it a day. Thank you all for attending the colloquium.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. With this, we call an end to the colloquium. Our bouquet of thanks goes to the participants without whom it would not have been possible to hold this event. Our thanks to the enlightened and knowledgeable panelists who have shared what they could in this short period of time. Thank you everyone for your participation, and we had a good session.